Chinedu dragged the bag into a corner, hidden by a wall. His hand shook as he untied the knot. Slowly, he opened it. What he saw made his knees weak. Inside the black nylon bag were bundles of money, thick bundles of naira notes, neatly packed together. The sight hit him like a thunderbolt. His eyes widened, his breath caught, and for a moment, he felt dizzy. Once upon a time, in a quiet village in the eastern Nigeria, there lived a young man named Chinedu Okafor. He was in his early 30s, tall and slender, with the kind of face that carried both hope and weariness. Chinedu grew up in a modest family house. The paint on the walls had long faded, and the compound was bare, with patches of sand and grass. His father had died years before, leaving his mother to raise 4 children alone. Chinedu was the second child and the only son. His sisters managed to get married early, leaving him and his mother behind. From his teenage years, he had been the one doing all sorts of works just to keep the house running. He cleared people's farm, fetched water for neighbors, and sometimes traveled to the next town to carry loads for market women. Yet, no matter how much he tried, the money was never enough. By the time he turned 30, life seemed to have turned its back on him. Most of his mates had either traveled to the city or were building houses in the village. Whenever he went to community meetings or weddings, he always felt people's eyes on him, whispering that he was a man with no direction, a man wasting away in the village. Their words pierced him like arrows. One evening, after a long day of helping a neighbor repair a fence, he sat outside his house with his mother. The setting sun painted the sky orange, and the air smelled of roasted maize from a neighbor's compound. His mother looked at him with worry. "Chinedu, my son," she said softly, "you cannot continue like this. This village has nothing to offer you again. Every day, I see the hunger in your eyes, and it breaks my heart. Why don't you go to Lagos? Maybe your story will change there." Chinedu sighed deeply. He had thought of Lagos many times. He had heard stories of men who left the village with nothing and returned years later, driving cars and wearing fine clothes. Yet, he had also heard stories of others who went and came back with nothing but shame. "Mama," he said, his voice low, "what if I go and things became worse? What if I go and cannot survive? Here at least, I still find small work." His mother reached for his hand. Her palms were rough from years of farm work. "My son, you will never know until you try. You are a good man. God will not allow you to suffer forever. Go, try. Even if you sleep on the floor, at least you will be closer to opportunity than here." That night, Chinedu lay awake on his tin mattress. The sound of crickets filled the air. His mother's words echoed in his mind. He thought of his late father, who had always believed that hard work would open doors. He thought of the humiliation he faced whenever his peers looked down on him. He thought of the future, the kind of man he wanted to be. By the time the first cock crowed at dawn, his decision was made. He would leave for Lagos. 2 weeks later, with the little money his mother borrowed from a women's cooperative, Chinedu boarded an old cricket bus headed to Lagos. The journey was long and uncomfortable. Chickens clunked in baskets under seats, and the bus rattled as though it would break down any minute. He carried only one small bag containing 2 shirts, 1 pair of trousers, and a warm pair of shoes. As the bus rolled out of the village, his mother stood by the roadside waving, his wrapper tied tightly around her waist, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Chinedu pressed his face against the dusty window holding back his own tears. He promised himself he would make her proud. The highway stretched endlessly. At every stop, hawkers pushed roasted corn, plantain chips, and sachet water through the windows. Passengers bargained loudly, and sometimes quarrel broke out over sitting. Chinedu remained silent, lost in thought. He imagined himself in Lagos, tall buildings, busy roads, endless opportunities. But he also imagined hunger, homelessness, and rejection. The closer the bus got to the city, the more his heart pounded. When the bus finally entered Lagos, Chinedu was overwhelmed. The city buzzed with energy, and he had never felt that way before. Traffic stretched for miles, with impatient drivers honking and shouting. Billboards towered above roads, advertising everything from cement to mobile phones. Street hawkers darted between cars, balancing trays of goods on their heads. Chinedu stepped down from the bus with trembling legs, his nose filled with mixed smell of roasted suya, petrol fumes, and sweat. People moved fast. Everyone seemed to be in a hurry. He clutched his small bag tightly, afraid it might be snatched. He remembered his friend Ifani, who had left the village years earlier and promised him a place to stay if he ever came to Lagos. After asking around, he finally boarded a noisy yellow bus that took him to Agege, where Ifani lived. Ifani was waiting for him at the roadside when Chinedu arrived. He had grown bigger than Chinedu remembered. His face was rough, and his shirt was stained with cement from construction work. Yet, he smiled warmly when he saw Chinedu. "Ah, my brother, you finally made it," Ifani shouted, hugging him. Chinedu smiled faintly. "Yes, my brother. I could not remain in the village any longer. Mama even begged me to come. Life was too hard." They walked together into a narrow street filled with noise and the smell of fried beans. Small children played barefoot in the dust. Men sat on wooden benches outside drinking sachet gin. The houses were old and crowded together. Their balconies lined with clothes hung to dry. Ifani led him into a one-room apartment on the top roof of a two-story building. The room was small and stuffy, with only one bed pushed against the wall, a plastic chair, and a table. The ceiling was cracked, and the paint on the walls peeled off in patches. "This is where I stay," Ifani said. "You are welcome, my brother. We will manage together." Chinedu felt a mix of gratitude and sadness. It was not what he had dreamed of, but it was better than sleeping on the street. The next morning, Chinedu woke early and followed Ifani out in search of work. They walked from site to site, asking for construction jobs. Some foremen shook their heads, others laughed at them. "No work today," was the common reply. By evening, they returned home tired, with empty stomachs. Days turned into weeks, and no real job came. Ifani sometimes found temporary work at building sites, but Chinedu was not so lucky. Hunger became his closest companion. Many nights, he slept with an empty stomach, listening to his neighbor's radio playing loudly while his own body groaned. One afternoon, while wandering the streets in frustration, Chinedu noticed some boys picking irons, bottles, and plastics from trash bins and selling them to a junk dealer. At first, the idea seemed shameful, but hunger has a way of silencing pride. The next morning, he joined them. He searched through dirty trash bins, picking bent irons, empty cans, and discarded plastics. The work was filthy and humiliating. Sometimes people insulted him, calling him a beggar. But each evening, he managed to sell his collection for a few hundred naira. It was not much, but it bought him bread and water. Though life was extremely hard, Chinedu never gave up hope. Each time he counted his little earnings, he reminded himself that tomorrow might be better. He often wrote letters to his mother, assuring her that he was fine even when he was not. He could not bear to break her heart. At night, lying on the floor of Ifani's small room. He stared at the cracked ceiling and whispered prayers. God, do not forget me. One day, let me also smile. And though his hands were dirty with scraps, his heart remained clean with hope. The morning sun shone slowly over Lagos, painting the busy city with a golden glow. Chinedu woke up on the cold cement floor of Ifani's one-room apartment. His body ached from the hard surface, but he was already used to it. Around him, the noise of the compound was alive. Women shouting at their children to hurry to school, hawkers balancing trays of akara and bread, and loud radios blasting Fuji music. Chinedu rubbed his eyes, picked up his worn shirt from the chair, and slipped it on. Hunger gnawed at his belly. He had managed to eat only bread and sachet water the previous night. Today, like every other day, he would search for scraps. I go hustle for iron today, he said to Ifani, who still lying on the bed, half asleep. Ifani groaned and turned. Good luck, my brother. This Lagos no easy oh, but one day, things go change. Chinedu nodded silently, even though his mind was full of doubt. He picked up the old sack bag he used for gathering scraps and stepped out into the noisy street. He walked long distances, sometimes bending into dustbins, other times dragging bent irons from roadside dumps. The smell was awful: rotting food, dead rats, and smoke from burning refuse. Many people wrinkled their noses or hissed when they saw him, but Chinedu kept moving. By midday, the sun was hot. Sweat ran down his face as he wandered into a wealthier part of the city. The wide roads were lined with tall gates, painted fences, and trimmed flowers. Expensive cars glistened in driveways. To Chinedu, it was like another world, a world he could only dream of entering. He walked carefully, scanning the streets. Near the corner of one gated mansion, he noticed a heap of trash bags waiting for collection. Something about the heap caught his eyes. A black bag, larger and heavier looking than the rest. It lay half buried under smaller nylon bags. Chinedu paused. His heart thumped faster. Usually, he picked metals, bottles and plastics, but this bag looked different. Curiosity touched at him. He bent down, brushed away the lighter trash, and pulled the bag out. The weight surprised him. It was heavy, almost too heavy for ordinary rubbish. He looked around quickly, worried someone might be watching. The street was quiet, only the faint hum of a generator from a nearby house. Chinedu dragged the bag into a corner, hidden by a wall. His hands shook as he untied the knot. Slowly, he opened it. What he saw made his knees weak. Inside the black nylon bag were bundles of money, thick bundles of naira notes, neatly packed together. The sight hit him like a thunderbolt. His eyes widened, his breath caught, and for a moment, he felt dizzy. He touched one bundle, squeezing it with trembling hands. The notes were real, not fake, not paper, real solid cash. He quickly closed the bag again, his heart pounding so loudly he thought it would burst. Fear rushed through him like cold water. What if someone came and accused him of stealing? What if the owners of the money appeared? What if the police caught him? Yet, excitement bubbled inside him. This was more money than he had ever seen in his entire life, more money than his family had ever touched. He could not even imagine how many millions were inside. Chinedu sat on the ground, his sack of scraps forgotten beside him. Sweat poured from his face, not just from the hot sun, but from fear. A voice in his head whispered, "Run! Carry it and go before somebody sees you." Another voice argued, "What if this money belongs to dangerous people? What if they trace it back to you?" His entire body shook. He wanted to scream but swallowed the sound. His eyes darted around. The street was still quiet, though a man walked far off, pushing a wheelbarrow of oranges. Chinedu quickly tied the bag again. lifted it with all his strength, and staggered away. His back bent under the weight, but adrenaline fueled him. Every step felt like a journey through fire. He imagined eyes watching him from the windows of the big houses. He imagined police sirens chasing him. His legs trembled, but he refused to stop. Instead of heading straight to the main road where people could see him, Chinedu slipped into narrow back streets, moving like a man carrying contraband. His sacks of scraps swung on one shoulder, the black bag clutched tightly in his arms. Children played football nearby, shouting noisily, but none paid him attention. Still, he walked fast, his eyes scanning every face. A dog barked from behind a gate, making his heart leap. He imagined it breaking free and dragging the bag from him. By the time he reached Ifani's street, his shirt was soaked with sweat. He stopped briefly, panting. Then, with renewed energy, he climbed the rickety stairs of the building. Inside the small room, he locked the door and dropped the bag on the floor. His chest rose and fell heavily. The room was silent except for the faint sound of music drifting in from a neighbor's radio. For minutes, he just stared at the bag. His hand shook as he untied it again, exposing the bundles of cash. The sight was even more overwhelming indoors. The money looked endless, each bundle packed tightly, stacked on top of another. Chinedu pressed his hand against his chest, afraid his heart would give out. He whispered to himself, "This cannot be real. God, is this how my life will change? Is this what they mean when they say miracle?" Tears welled up in his eyes. All the years of suffering, of hunger, of shame, could this money erase them? Could this be his ticket out of poverty? Yet, fear sat beside his joy. He imagined policemen storming the room, accusing him of robbery. He imagined dangerous men with guns breaking down the door. Chinedu wiped his face and forced himself to breathe slowly. He tied the bag again and pushed it under the bed. That night, Chinedu could not sleep. He tossed and turned on the floor, staring at the ceiling. Ifani was out late and had not returned. Alone in the room, Chinedu felt both rich and terrified. Every sound outside made him jump. Footsteps on the stairs, voices in the corridor, even the cry of a baby from a neighbor's room. He imagined people coming for the money. He whispered prayers. "God, please protect me. Don't let anyone know. Show me what to do with this money." When Ifani finally stumbled in past midnight, tired from a day at the construction site, Chinedu pretended to be asleep. He did not want to reveal anything yet. He needed to think. He needed to decide whether to tell his friend or keep it a secret. As he lay on the floor, his eyes wide open, Chinedu realized that his life had changed forever. But whether for good or bad, only time would tell. The sun was already high in the sky when Chinedu finally stirred from the mat on the floor. His eyes were heavy with tiredness. Though he had barely slept, the image of the black bag under the bed kept returning to his mind. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw a bundle of crisp naira notes stacked like blocks. Fear and excitement wrestled in his chest. He rose slowly, careful not to wake Ifani, who was snoring on the bed. Chinedu walked to the corner of the room and pulled out the bag slightly, just to assure himself it was still there. The sight of it sent a wave of both joy and dread through him. He quickly pushed it back in and sat on the plastic chair. All morning, he debated silently. Should I tell Ifani or not? On one hand, Ifani was his closest friend in Lagos, the one who gave him a place to stay when he had nowhere to go. On the other hand, this was no ordinary discovery. It was a treasure that could change his life. Ifani was not known for patience or wisdom. Would telling him be safe? Chinedu spent hours wrestling with the decision. He paced the small room, his fingers running through his hair. Sometimes He convinced himself to keep quiet. Better to carry his burden alone than risk betrayal. But moments later, his heart would remind him, this man has been with you since childhood. You both drank from the same stream, chased the same football, shared food in the same plate. He gave you space in his room when you came here. Would it not be wicked to hide this from him? By afternoon, the inner battle had worn him out. Sweat coated his forehead, though the day was not unusually hot. He finally sat down on the edge of the bed, staring at Ifeanyi, who had just returned from a half-day job at a construction site. Ifeanyi, Chinedu began carefully, his voice low. There is something I must tell you. Something serious. Ifeanyi looked up, curious. He was eating bread and beans, his face shining with palm oil. What is it? You look like somebody that has seen a ghost. Chinedu's heart pounded. He swallowed hard. Yesterday, when I went to pick iron, I found something. Not ordinary iron. A bag. A bag? Ifeanyi repeated, still chewing. What kind of bag? Chinedu hesitated, then stood up. He went to the bed, pulled out the black bag from underneath, and placed it on the floor. The sight alone made Ifeanyi pause, his spoon midway. Open it, Chinedu whispered. With trembling fingers, he untied the nylon. When the first bundle of money showed, Ifeanyi dropped his spoon with a loud clatter. His mouth fell open. Jesus Christ of Nazareth! He exclaimed, falling to his knees beside the bag. He picked one bundle, flipped through it, and gasped. This is real money. This is no joke, oh. Chinedu, where did you find this? Chinedu quickly told him the story of the trash heap in the rich neighborhood, how he almost left it behind, but curiosity made him check. As he spoke, Ifeanyi's eyes never left the bundles. They both sat on the floor and began to count, hands shaking, voices trembling. Bundle after bundle, the cash piled higher. Neither of them had ever handled so much money in their lives. It was overwhelming. By the time they finished, they stared at each other in silence. The total was far beyond anything they could comprehend. Millions upon millions. Chinedu's voice broke the silence. His tone was solemn, heavy with sincerity. Ifeanyi, my brother, we have suffered together in this city. You gave me shelter when I had nothing. I cannot keep this blessing to myself. We will share it, half for you, half for me. His eyes glistened with tears of gratitude. We have both seen hunger. We have both been insulted. Maybe God has finally remembered us. Ifeanyi's lips spread into a wide smile. He laughed, clapping his hands, shaking his head in disbelief. Chinedu, Chinedu, you are truly my brother. God bless you, eh? See how God works. From iron picking to millionaires in one night. My brother, this is miracle. This is testimony. He hugged Chinedu tightly, patting his back. Outwardly, he seemed grateful, excited, even overwhelmed. But deep inside, another fire had been lit. The fire of greed. As Chinedu spoke of plans, how they could invest, how they must be careful, how they should not waste the money, Ifeanyi's mind drifted elsewhere. A quiet, dangerous voice whispered in his heart, why share when you can have everything? You discovered it together now, yes, but who truly controls it? What if tomorrow he changes his mind? What if he hides some bundles? What if he cheats you? Would it not be better to take all for yourself? The smile on his face never faded, but in his heart, dark thoughts grew like weeds in fertile soil. That evening, they locked the door and spoke in hushed tones about their future. Chinedu dreamed loud of starting business, maybe selling building materials or opening a provision store. He imagined sending money to his mother, building her a new house, and finally lifting her out of poverty. Ifeanyi nodded eagerly, but in his mind, he saw himself driving a brand new car through the streets of Lagos, women chasing after him, neighbors hailing him as a big man. He saw himself drinking expensive wine in a hotel suite, surrounded by luxuries he had always envied. To Chinedu, the money was hope. To Ifani, it was temptation. As night fell, they hid the bag again and lay down to rest. Chinedu's mind was at peace, believing he had done the right thing by sharing his secret. For the first time since arriving in Lagos, he felt tomorrow might hold something good. But Ifeanyi lay awake on the bed, staring into the darkness. His smile had faded. His eyes glowed with restless thoughts. The sound of Chinedu's steady breathing on the floor made him clench his fists. Half is not enough, he told himself silently. Why should I share millions when I can have all? Does he think life is about fairness? The city is for the strong. If I take it all, nobody will know. Nobody will stop me. In the stillness of the night, Ifani's heart hardened. The seed of betrayal had taken root. When Chinedu finally drifted off to sleep, his breathing slow and steady, Ifani slipped off the bed. He paced the narrow room, biting his nails. His eyes fell on the bag hidden under the bed. He touched it gently and felt the bundles inside. A wild smile crossed his face. He had seen a small sachet of sleeping powder earlier that week at a nearby pharmacy. A casual laborer had told him it was used to treat insomnia. Ifani had bought a small pack out of curiosity, never thinking he would need it. Now, the idea struck him like lightning. A little powder in Chinedu's food or drink, and his friend would sink into deep sleep. The plan shaped itself quickly. He would wait until the next evening. Chinedu always bought bread and beans for supper. Ifani would offer to serve him, mix the powder in his portion, and then, when Chinedu was unconscious, carry the bag and disappear into the night. The following day, Ifani behaved like nothing was wrong. He joked with Chinedu, laughed about their future, and even discussed how they might invest. Chinedu, innocent and trusting, believed every word. By evening, as planned, Ifani suggested they eat early. My brother, you worked hard yesterday. Let me serve you tonight. Chinedu smiled, grateful for his friend's kindness. Ifani, you are too good. Thank you. Ifani went to the shared corridor where neighbors cooked, bought beans and bread, and returned. While pretending to arrange plates, he sprinkled the sleeping powder into Chinedu's food, stirring it carefully until it dissolved. His own portion remained untouched. They sat together on the floor and ate. Chinedu, tired and hungry, finished his plate quickly. Ifani pretended to eat, but his mind was on what was about to happen. Within 30 minutes, Chinedu began to feel heavy. His eyelids drooped, and his body sank into the mat. Ah, Ifani, I don't know what is wrong with me. Sleep dey catch me strong tonight, he murmured, yawning deeply. Ifani laughed and forced a smile. It's because of all the stress. My brother, rest well. Tomorrow we will plan properly. Chinedu nodded weakly, turned on his side, and within minutes, he was gone. His breathing deep, his body limp. The drug had worked faster than Ifani expected. For a long moment, Ifani stood over him, watching. His chest rose and fell peacefully, unaware of the betrayal beside him. Guilt pricked Ifani's heart briefly, but greed quickly silenced it. When the compound grew quiet and most neighbors were asleep, Ifani sprang into action. He pulled the bag from under the bed, untied it briefly to reassure himself, and grinned at the bundles of cash. He tied it again tightly, slung it over his shoulder, and looked around the room one last time. Chinedu lay on the floor helpless, completely unaware. I'm sorry, my brother, Ifani whispered, though his tone carried no real remorse. This city is for survivors. One man must rise, even if another must fall. He unlocked the door gently, stepped into the dim corridor, and tiptoed past the other rooms. The bag was heavy, but excitement gave him strength. He descended the rickety stairs, his sandals slapping softly against the wood, and slipping out into Lagos night. The streets were quiet, only the distant rumble of trailers on the highway and the occasional bark of dogs. He hailed an Okada rider and disappeared into the darkness, the stolen fortune clutched tightly to his chest. The morning light crept into the small room, warming Chinedu's face. He stared slowly, his body unusually weak. His head felt heavy, and his throat was dry. He sat up, confused. The room was too quiet. Ifeanyi, he called weakly. There was no answer. He looked around. The bed was empty. The chair was empty. He dragged himself to the corner, lifted the bed frame, and his heart stopped. The black bag was gone. For a few seconds, his mind refused to believe it. He searched the entire room, opening old boxes, checking behind the door, even looking under the mat. Nothing. His hands trembled violently. No, no, this can't be, he whispered, his voice breaking. He stumbled back to the bed and sat heavily, his head buried in his hands. Then the truth hit him like a hammer. Ifeanyi had betrayed him. Chinedu wept bitterly, the kind of cry that shook his whole body. Tears streamed down his cheeks and dropped onto his shirt. His chest tightened until he could hardly breathe. How could he do this to me? After everything? After I trusted him? After I shared my secrets? Memories of their friendship flooded his mind. Childhood games in the village, nights of hunger they endured together in Lagos, the laughter they shared. It all felt like a cruel lie now. The betrayal cut deeper than the loss of money. It was the loss of trust, the realization that the one person he had believed in had turned against him. He cried until his eyes were swollen, until his voice cracked, until his strength failed. But no amount of tears could bring back the bag. It was gone, and so was his friend. By afternoon, neighbors noticed Chinedu's swollen eyes and quietness, but he told no one the truth. How could he explain that he and Ifeanyi had found a fortune, only for Ifeanyi to vanish with it? They would never believe him. Some might even suspect he was lying or part of something criminal. So he locked the pain inside his chest, carrying it like a wound that would never heal. That night, as he lay again on the bare floor, hunger gnawing at him and betrayal burning in his heart, Chinedu whispered one prayer. God, if truly you exist, fight for me. Do not let evil win. The night Ifeanyi disappeared with the black bag, Lagos seemed to open its arms to him. He rode on the back of a motorcycle through dark streets, his face glowing with excitement. The heavy bag pressed against his chest, but instead of fear, he felt triumph. For the first time in his life, he believed he was in control. He rented a room in a small guest house that night, dropped the bag on the bed, and untied it again. That morning, Ifeanyi woke up as a different man in the guest house he rented that night. Gone was the struggling laborer who once begged for daily bread. Now he saw himself as a king. He walked into a boutique in Ikeja and bought new clothes, designer shirts, expensive jeans, shiny shoes. The sales attendant watched in shock as he paid cash, pulling out bundles like it was nothing. From there, he moved to a car dealership. He did not even bargain. He pointed at a flashy second-hand Toyota Camry and handed over the money. When he drove out of the lot, the smell of the car's leather seat filled his nose, and he grinned widely. The steering wheel felt like a crown in his hands. Within days, Ifeanyi transformed. He checked into a high-class hotel in Victoria Island. He ordered plates of food he could not even pronounce. He drank expensive champagne, pouring some on the floors just to show off. He tipped waiters with crisp notes and bragged loudly in the bar. At night, women gathered around him. He bought them wigs, shoes, phones, and gold earrings. They hailed him as chief, showering him with attention. He enjoyed the flattery, basked in it, and spent recklessly to keep it flowing. The poor man who once struggled in a one-room apartment now lived like royalty. But while Ifeanyi was lost in his new life of excess, shadows were moving silently. The money he carried did not fall from heaven. It belonged to a notorious robbery gang that had raided a bullion van weeks before. After the operation, they had stashed parts of the loot in black bags, hidden in trash heaps to avoid detection by police. One of those bags was the very one Chinedu had discovered. When the gang returned for it and found it missing, suspicion spread among them. They began to ask questions, threatening informants, tracing whispers on the streets. It did not take long before word reached them. A certain young man was suddenly spreading millions without any known source of wealth. His name, Ifeanyi. Days turned into weeks, and Ifeanyi's arrogance grew. He bought another car. He rented a small apartment in Lekki and furnished it with flat-screen TVs, air conditioners, and imported couches. He threw loud parties that disturbed his neighbors. Music blasted, drinks flowed, and women laughed until morning. Some neighbors whispered, "Where did this young man see such amount of money that he spent so recklessly?" But Ifeanyi did not care. To him, Lagos was his playground. One rainy night, after another reckless party at his apartment, Ifeanyi dismissed his guest and fell asleep on the couch, drunk with wine. The black bag, still half filled with money, sat carelessly in the corner. Around midnight, the front door burst open. Three men in dark clothes stormed in. Their faces were cold, their eyes burning with anger. Before Ifeanyi could rise, one of them slammed the butt of a gun against his head. He collapsed with a cry. "You think you can chop our money?" one of them shouted, kicking him in the ribs. They dragged him up, slapped him repeatedly, and threw him against the wall. The leader opened the bag, inspected the bundles, and nodded. "Yes, this is our own. Foolish boy, you thought you found miracle. This Lagos no get miracle. Every kobo here belongs to somebody." They beat him until blood ran from his mouth and nose. His cries filled the apartment, but no neighbor dared to intervene. Finally, they collected the remaining bundles, kicked him once more, and left him half dead on the floor. By morning, news had spread. Neighbors gathered outside, whispering and shaking their heads. Some said armed robbers attacked him. Others said he was part of a gang and his partners turned against him. When police arrived, they did not see a victim. They saw a suspect. The rumors of his sudden wealth, his reckless lifestyle, and the violent attack painted him guilty in their eyes. They handcuffed him, dragged him into their van, and drove off. At the station, under bright lights, he was interrogated. "Where did you get that money?" the officer asked. Ifeanyi stammered, his swollen lips trembling. I found it. I swear I found it." But no one believed him. His story sounded too foolish. In Lagos, nobody believed in found fortunes. The police wrote their report. Suspected gang member arrested with robbery proceeds. Weeks later, after endless questioning and no clear evidence of innocence, Ifeanyi was remanded in prison custody. His once neat designer clothes were replaced with torn prison uniforms. The man who had bathed in wine and women now sat on a cold cement floor among hardened criminals. Inside the crowded cell, he was nobody. His flashy cars, hotel nights, and the wild parties meant nothing. He ate watery beans and sour garri. He fought for space to sleep. He learned quickly that in prison, respect was earned through survival, not money. At night, when rats ran across the floor and mosquitoes hummed in the dark, he remembered Chinedu. He remembered the mat on the floor they had once shared. He remembered the moment Chinedu had said, "We suffered together. I cannot enjoy this alone. Let us share it." Tears filled his eyes as regret crushed him. He had chosen greed, and now he had nothing. Months passed. Visitors stopped coming. The women who once sang his name disappeared. The cars were seized. The apartment was emptied. His name was dragged through newspapers as an armed robbery suspect. The shame was unbearable. Each time he stood in the prison yard under the hot sun, he wondered how quickly fortune had turned into ruin. Greed had raised him like a king for nothing, but it had also cast him down lower than he had ever been. And there, behind the prison walls, Ifani finally understood the bitter truth. Quick wealth without foundation always ends in disgrace. The betrayal had left a scar on Chinedu's soul. Every morning, he woke up in the cramped one-room apartment with a heavy heart. Each time he looked at the empty space where Ifani's bed used to be, pain stabbed him afresh. The black bag was gone, and so was his friend. At first, he could hardly eat or walk. He sat for long hours staring at the cracked walls, replaying the night over and over. He asked himself how he could have been so foolish to trust. He questioned why life always seemed to mock him. But as days turned into weeks, he realized something. Tears would not bring back the money, and bitterness would not erase the betrayal. The only way forward was to stand up again. So one Monday morning, before the compound fully stirred, Chinedu picked up his old sack bag, slung it across his shoulder, and stepped into the busy street. He would return to the only thing he knew, picking scraps. The sun was barely up when Chinedu bent over the first heap of rubbish. His hand shifted through rusted things, broken bottles, and twisted iron rods. The stench was foul, but he walked with quiet determination. Passerby glanced at him with disdain, some shaking their heads, others muttering insults. But he no longer cared about people's opinions. Hunger had no pride, and survival was its own honor. Every evening, he sold his collection to junk buyers and pocketed just enough for bread and sachet water. Life was hard, but his spirit refused to die. He reminded himself daily, as long as there is breath, there is hope. One humid afternoon, after hours of combing through trash heaps in Sulere, Chinedu stumbled upon something unusual. Behind a tall painted fence, workers had dumped bags of refuse for disposal. Most were ordinary black nylons stuffed with food waste and plastics. But one bag caught his attention. It was smaller than usual, tied tightly and strangely heavy. Curiosity pricked his heart again, just as it had weeks earlier when he found the first bag. His hand shook as he pulled it aside. He looked around. The street was quiet. What he saw made his eyes widen. Inside were gold jewelry pieces, heavy chains, bangles, rings, glittering even under the dull sunlight. Mixed among them were folded documents and bundles of foreign currencies, crisp US dollars and British pounds. Chinedu's knees weakened. He almost dropped the bag. His heartbeat thundered in his ears. For a moment, he thought he was dreaming. Unlike the first discovery, when excitement had overwhelmed him, this time he froze. Fear gripped him. Memories of Ifani's betrayal, the gang attack, and prison came rushing back. He tied the bag again, stuffed it into his sack, and walked away slowly. He said nothing to anyone. By the time he reached his small room, sweat soaked his shirt. He locked the door, dropped the bag on the floor, and sat staring at it. All night, he battled with his thoughts. Part of him wanted to run to Ifani's old haunts and boast. Another part whispered caution. Do not repeat the same mistake. Take your time. Move wisely. This blessing is different. He prayed earnestly, asking God for direction. He remembered his late father's words. Wealth without wisdom is destruction. By morning, his decision was clear. He would not rush. He would take things slowly, one step at a time. Over the next weeks, Chinedu lived cautiously. He studied the documents carefully. They seemed like property papers, possibly dumped by mistake. He hid them away safely, unsure what to do with them. For the jewelry, he began discreetly. He took one small gold ring to a local buyer in Balogun market, pretending it was a family heirloom. He asked for its worth. When the buyer tested it and paid him a decent amount, Chinedu's heart skipped. He knew the other pieces were genuine too. He sold them bit by bit, never too much at once. With the little dollars he exchanged carefully, he gathered enough to rent his own single room apartment, separate from the old compound. The first night he slept there, he felt like a free man at last. Chinedu did not waste his earnings on frivolities. He remembered Ifani's downfall and promised himself he would never walk that path. He began visiting building sites where he once begged for jobs. This time, he came as a small supplier. With part of the money, he bought a few bags of cement and resold them at a small profit. It was difficult at first, but he pressed on. Soon, merchants and builders knew his face. They trusted his honesty because he delivered without cheating. Every naira he made, he reinvested. Every mistake, he learned from. Within months, his hustle grew into a small building materials business. He rented a wooden shop near a busy junction, stocked with nails, rods and cement and blocks. The transformation in Chinedu's life was quiet but steady. He no longer roamed trash heaps. He dressed neatly in clean shirts and sandals. Neighbors noticed he carried himself with new confidence. At night, instead of lying on the floor in hunger, he now sat on a plastic table, writing figures in a small notebook, calculating profits and planning expansions. He sent money home to his mother, who cried tears of joy and prayed of thanksgiving. He promised her a new house, and though it was not yet built, she believed him. Chinedu's days of shame were giving way to days of dignity. Unlike Ifani's reckless rise, his growth was gradual, like a seed watered daily until it blossomed. One evening, as he locked up his shop, Chinedu leaned against the door frame and watched the busy Lagos street. The air was filled with honking buses, shouting traders, and hawkers balancing goods. For the first time since arriving in the city, he felt peace. He whispered to himself, "God gave me a second chance. I will not waste it." And with that resolve, he walked home, carrying hope not just for himself, but for everyone who believed that patience and wisdom could turn suffering into success. Morning came softly in Lagos. The sun climbed slowly in the sky, casting light on the bustling streets. Traders opened their shops, buses honked impatiently, and hawkers called out their wares. Amid this chaos, Chinedu was already on his feet, dressed neatly in a simple shirt and well-pressed trousers. His face was calm, but his steps were firm. He had changed, not overnight, not by reckless living, but through steady work and discipline. The small wooden shop he once started with a few bags of cement had become too small. Every day, more builders came to him. They trusted him because he never cheated, never delivered fake products, never inflated prices unfairly. His reputation grew like a tree planted by water. At first, Chinedu rented a second shop beside the first one. He stocked it with iron rods, roofing sheets, and paint. Within a year, both shops overflowed with goods. Contractors began to approach him directly, asking for bulk supplies. He saved every profit, never wasting on unnecessary things. While others rushed to nightclubs, he spent his evenings balancing his accounts, reading about business, and listening to advice from older traders. Soon, he rented a warehouse at the edge of the city. It was a large building, painted cream, with wide doors where trucks could offload cement, blocks, and iron rods. The day he signed the lease, he stood before the building in silence, his eyes moist. He remembered the days when he bent over trash heaps, picking rusted irons with bare hands. Now, builders lined up to collect supplies from him. His company grew in name and strength. People no longer called him the iron picker. They now called him Odogu Supplies, a nickname that stuck because he always delivered in bulk. Chinedu had walked the streets of Lagos for years, sweating under the sun, squeezed into noisy yellow buses, and trekking long distances when he couldn't pay fare. He never imagined owning a car. But one evening, after another successful delivery to a construction site, the foreman clapped his shoulder and said, "My brother, you need a car. You cannot be doing this kind of big business and still be sweating inside Danfo. Respect yourself." The words sank deep. Weeks later, after much thought, Chinedu visited a car dealer. His heart beat loudly as he pointed to fairly used Toyota Corolla, silver in color, clean and strong. When he counted the cash and received the keys, his hands shook. Driving it out of the lot, he felt a mix of pride and humility. As he held the steering wheel, he whispered, "Thank you, Lord. This is not just a car, this is a testimony." Neighbors cheered when he parked it at his compound. Children ran to touch it, shouting, "Uncle Chinedu has bought a car." Even his landlord came out, shook his hand, and congratulated him. But all of his achievements, the one closest to his heart was his mother. In the village, Mama Grace still lived in the old cement house with rusted zinc and faded walls. Each time he sent money, she thanked him, but he knew she deserved more. So one December, he returned home quietly with a plan. He called the local builders and showed them the land beside the old house. He paid them in full and instructed them to start working immediately. Brick by brick, the structure rose. A beautiful bungalow with a wide veranda, modern roofing, tiled floors and painted walls. It was more than a house. It was a dream fulfilled. The day he handed the keys to his mother, she fell on her knees, tears streaming down her wrinkled face. "My son," she cried, "may heaven bless you. May your children never know suffering. You have wiped away my shame." Chinedu lifted her up gently. "Mama, this is only the beginning. You carried me through hunger. You prayed for me when I had nothing. Now it is my turn to honor you." News spread through the village like wildfire. Elders praised him, young men envied him, and women prayed that their sons would grow like him. Back in Lagos, his name carried weight. Builders, contractors, even architects know him. His warehouse was always busy with trucks loading cement, blocks, and roofing sheets. Workers hailed him, shouting, "Odogu, Odogu," as they carried goods. He employed youths from the neighborhood, giving them fair wages and treating them kindly. Whenever they made mistakes, he corrected them with patience instead of anger. Soon, word spread that working with him was a blessing. People began to call him a young millionaire. He laughed at the title, shaking his head. "I am just a man who suffered and found mercy," he often said, but deep inside, he knew he had risen above his past. Despite his wealth, Chinedu never became proud. He still wore simple clothes. He greeted everyone politely, from the smallest child to the oldest neighbor. He still attended his small church on Sundays, sitting quietly at the back. When neighbors quarreled, he meditated. When tenants in his compound struggled to pay rent, he sometimes helped them secretly. He remembered how hunger once humbled him, and he promised never to mock anyone in that state. At night, after locking his warehouse and driving home, he often sat alone in his living room, reflecting. His heart swelled with gratitude. He had walked through betrayal, poverty, and shame, but now he stood tall because he chose patience over greed. One evening, as he drove through the city in his silver Corolla, passing tall buildings and bright billboards, he caught his reflection in the rear view. He no longer looked like the desperate scrap picker who once dug through trash. His eyes carried confidence, his posture carried dignity. He whispered softly, "This is the hand of God. This is what happens when a man refuses to give up." As Lagos buzzed around, Chinedu knew one thing for certain. His story had only begun. The years passed like swift shadows. Lagos remained the same in its noise and energy, but the lives of two men had gone in an opposite directions. For Chinedu, every day of hard work brought him new blessings. From a single wooden shop, his business had grown into a company with branches in different parts of the city. His silver Toyota Corolla was long replaced by a black SUV with tinted windows, a car that made people turn when it passed. He had moved from a rented flat into a furnished duplex where he lived in quiet comfort. His mother, now older, sat in her veranda in the village, enjoying the peace of a house her son built with pride. People spoke his name with respect. To the young men of the neighborhood, he was not just a businessman, but a symbol of what patience could create. For Ifeanyi, however, life had been a long prison sentence in every sense of the word. It was a hot afternoon when the prison gate creaked open and Ifeanyi stumbled out. His once broad shoulders had shrunk, his skin was rough, his hair overgrown, and his eyes carried a hollow emptiness. He wore faded clothes donated by a charity group, and his slippers were so worn that the ground showed through. He paused at the gate, shielding his eyes from the sun. The free world felt strange. For years, he had stared at the walls and bars. Now the open sky frightened him. Other released inmates walked past him, some laughing, some rushing to meet family members waiting outside. Ifeanyi had no one waiting. No mother, no sibling, no friend. The women who once clung to him had long vanished. His name had become a curse. With slow, heavy steps, he walked toward the road. He had no destination, no money, no plan, just a body broken by time and a mind haunted by regret. Days turned into weeks. Ifeanyi drifted through Lagos like a ghost. He begged for food, slept under bridges, and bathed in public taps. Sometimes he worked menial jobs, pushing wheelbarrows at market or carrying loads for traders, but the pay was barely enough to survive. At night, when he lay on cold cement floors, rats running past him, memories tormented him. He saw the bag of money, Chinedu's trusting face, and his own betrayal. He remembered the reckless nights of wine and women, followed by the brutal attack of the gang and the cold iron bars of prison. More than once, he whispered to himself, if only I had listened, if only I had shared, if only I had patience. But life never rewinds. One Saturday afternoon, years after his release, Ifeanyi wandered into Ikeja. The sun burned overhead, and his body ached from hunger. He walked slowly, his slippers flapping against the tarred road. He was heading nowhere, just moving because staying in one place made him feel like a forgotten stone. Then he heard the sound of horns and the roar of an engine. A black SUV rolled slowly into the street, polished until it shone like a mirror. Behind it, two delivery trucks carried cement with the bold inscription, Odogu Building Supplies Limited. The SUV stopped in front of a large supermarket. The door opened and out stepped Chinedu. He was dressed in a crisp white shirt, black trousers, and polished shoes. His hair was neatly cut, his face calm but commanding. Two young men rushed to carry his files and greet him with respect. Passerby paused, whispering, "That's Odogo himself." Ifeanyi froze. His chest tightened, his eyes filled with tears. For a long moment, Ifeanyi stood at a distance, unable to move. The contrast between them was like day and night. Once, they had shared a single room, a mat, and a bread eaten in silence. Now, one was a respected millionaire, and the other was a beggar in rags. His legs trembled as he finally walked forward. His voice cracked as he called, "Chinedu, my brother!" Chinedu turned, surprised. His eyes narrowed, studying the gaunt figure before him. It took a moment, but recognition dawned. His lips parted in shock. Ifeanyi, the man before him, was hardly recognizable, but the voice was the same. Chinedu's workers looked confused, wondering who the broken man was. Ifeanyi fell to his knees on the pavement. His tears splashed on the ground as he raised his hands. "My brother, Forgive me. I wronged you. I destroyed our friendship. I let greed blind me. Please forgive me." The street grew silent. People watched the scene with curiosity. Some whispered to each other, shocked that this wretched man knew the wealthy Odogu. Chinedu's face softened. He stepped closer, motioned for his workers to stand aside, and looked down at Ifeanyi. Memories flooded his mind. The betrayal, the drugged food, the empty morning after. For years, that pain had burned in him. But now, seeing Ifeanyi broken, regret carved into his very bones, the anger melted away. He reached down, touched his shoulder, and said gently, "I forgave you long ago, Ifeanyi. Not because you deserve it, but because bitterness would have changed me the way prison changed you." Ifeanyi wept harder. "You are a better man. Look at you now, respected, blessed. And look at me, empty, destroyed. I chose greed, and it ruined me." Chinedu helped him to his feet. His eyes were firm but kind. Then he spoke the words that would echo forever. "Greed destroyed you, but patience built me. Never betray a man who trusts you, Chinedu." The crowd around them nodded, murmuring in agreement. Some even clapped quietly. Ifeanyi lowered his head, shame heavy on his shoulders. He could not meet Chinedu's eyes. Chinedu stepped back into his SUV. The engine hummed, and the tinted windows reflected the broken man standing outside. As the car pulled away, Ifeanyi remained on the floor, his knees weak, his heart shattered. He bowed his head in deep regret, knowing he had lost not only wealth, but also the honor of true friendship. The black SUV disappeared into the busy Lagos traffic, a symbol of patience and honesty rewarded. Greed destroys. No matter how sweet it looks in the beginning, it will end in shame. Patience and honesty lead to true wealth. What comes slowly with wisdom will last. Not every quick money ends well. If it lacks foundation, it will collapse. Chinedu's story became a testimony across Lagos. The young man who rose from trash heaps to warehouse because he refused to let greed or betrayal define him. And Ifeanyi's life stood as a warning that betrayal of trust and hunger for quick riches can drag a man lower than poverty ever did. And with that, my dear friends, our story comes to a close. But remember, the magic of storytelling lives on, waiting to whisk us away on new adventures, where the wonders of imagination know no bounds. Goodbye for now, and may your dreams be filled with joy, wonder, and endless possibility. Thank you so much for watching. Please kindly comment, like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more interesting stories.